The impact of genetic drift on a population is randomness. The impact of genetic drift on allele frequencies is randomness. Genetic drift is randomness. Genetic drift is a stochastic process. Genetic drift increases as well as decreases the frequency of alleles in a non-adaptive manner. That is exactly what genetic drift does. And if you look at a population in terms of allele frequencies, and the population is bouncing up and down, bouncing up and down, bouncing up and down, that is an indication that in fact what you're seeing is genetic drift. Now, to a degree, it could also be due to natural selection, particularly if the time frames are long enough. You could have increases in the frequency of one allele followed by decreases in the frequency of that allele followed by increases, particularly when that allele is linked to some other beneficial alleles that keep changing back and forth in terms of which is most beneficial within the population. That's a process known as hitchhiking that's associated with periodic selection, and in fact it also in a sense is a random process because having one allele linked to another allele typically will be an entirely random situation. Whether an allele is a link to another, it really typically will not be a function of natural selection, but instead is simply a function of whether or not the two alleles just happen to be in the same genome. What we're looking at specifically here is the bouncing up and down of an allele that we can easily follow. We describe these alleles typically as selectively neutral markers. These often will, for example, change the color of a colony, such as when the beta-galactosidase gene is present versus not present. In this way, it's very easy to tell whether or not an allele is present or the frequency of an allele within a population. But if it's natural selection that's driving this, then it will be some other allele other than the beta-galactosidase gene that is causing the jumping up and down, or multiple alleles, whatever is most beneficial within a population at a given time across the entire genotype. But when you see this kind of pattern, particularly over short time frames, what it typically means is that the population is bouncing up and down in terms of allele frequencies due to random processes, and those random processes we call genetic drift.